Duel on Mount Taiyuan. Chapter 2. Yaoyao woke to the warmth and glow of the crackling fire. Her head throbbed with every breath, and her thoughts were too thick and heavy to make sense of. She sat up. The cavern was spacious, and the fire made long dancing shadows against its walls. Beyond the reach of the light, she saw only a vast pool of darkness before a small pocket of white opened. She judged that to be the entrance. Yaoyao picked up a small stick still kindling the flame from the fire and made her way toward it. The temperature dropped precipitously as she neared the mouth of the cave, and when she finally reached it, a sharp blast of cold wind hurled toward her, blowing her back and squelching the fire. Yaoyao stepped out and squinted against the blinding whiteness. Her teeth chattered, and her body shivered. Snow was falling, and the wind had recovered its breath and began to batter her anew. She took another step, and her foot sunk several inches into the thick snow. A hand grabbed her arm and pulled her back into the darkness. Yaoyao kicked the man but lost her balance and fell. She reached for her dagger to find it missing. Ling Feng smiled and held out her weapon. I shall be responsible for its safekeeping until your return to Ouyang Manor. Where are we? Mount Liang. Mount Liang? The mountain was more than 3 days' ride from Tianjin, and treacherous to climb even in the summer. You intend to wait out winter here? He smiled. Miss Ouyang, I'm impressed. If you had given me time to speak earlier, I would have told you that the path down is impassable from late autumn to early spring. Cut the pretense of civility after what you have done. My father will find me and then kill you. Perhaps, and perhaps not. He broke a twig and fed the pieces to the flames. My father would not have lost to yours. I've proven that. Your father was Ling Anluo, the wolf of Anding. She stopped short of calling the man by his latest epithet, the deviant wolf. The last tally was 33 victims, raped and murdered before her father set to rid the world of this scourge. She studied Ling Feng and wondered how much of his father did this madman take after. He certainly had no qualms bloody in his hands. Yaoyao suddenly had an urge to adjust the collar on her gown, pulling them tight together and crossing her arms around her body. At that moment, she made up her mind to throw herself into the fire than to suffer through any dishonor that may come her way. Do you know how he earned that title? Can one be proud of such a title? There is a duality to everything. Wolves are ruthless and cunning, but they are also fiercely loyal and social. My father embodied all those traits. Ling Feng tossed her a fur coat, likely his spared based on its size. You don't believe in his innocence? I have heard. You have heard, he said, staring at her. His eyes then softened. A lie repeated enough times by enough people becomes the truth. My father had a lot of enemies. Some in the government. Get some rest. Ling Feng laid down on his bedding, leaving Yaoyao to contemplate her options. She knew it was too late for her to head down the mountain pass with winter approaching. Fighting Ling Feng was tempting, but ultimately a fool's choice. If her father fought him to a near draw, she would have no chance. The only reasonable course of action was to wait. No one can remain vigilant forever. An opportunity would avail itself to her sooner or later. Yaoyao resigned herself to her current predicament and slid under the heavy coat. Her thoughts wandered from escape and vengeance to the man in front of her. Was he truly a madman, or simply an over-filial son caught in the lies and sins of his father? The fire crackled, and the wind howled. As her mind worked, her eyelids grew heavier. She blinked away sleep, once, twice. The growl in her stomach woke her. Ling Feng was in the process of restraining a bow. The quiver full of arrows lay against the far wall. She had noticed earlier the bundle of supplies that lay there. He had prepared his escape. Was she a contingency plan? You're awake and hungry. Yaoyao blushed, but quick in her retort. Where's the food? He pointed at the bundle. Salted meat, rice, dried vegetables. Since the storm has abated, I'm going to try my luck with fresh game. I figured it would be easier on the palate. I'll go with you. She didn't really want to go waddling through the snow, but it gave her a chance to scout her surroundings. When the time comes, knowing the paths available to her would be immensely useful. He studied her for a moment. All right, It's going to be grueling. I'm not going back until we find game or it gets dark. I've hunted in the past. He nodded and reached into his satchel, tossing her a strip of cured meat. You won't last without at least some food in your stomach. Ling Feng was right. The journey would have been even more difficult without the makeshift snowshoes made from attaching wood to their boots. Snow started to fall again and covered the tracks of prey wherever it alighted. She surmised that it had been over 2 hours based on the movement of the sun when they finally found their target. The rabbit was alone, bounding then pausing as it made its way across the white landscape, nearly invisible save a slight grayish tinge to parts of its coat. That mark was sufficiently to doom it. Yaoyao didn't even see Feng draw when an arrow whistled through the air and sent the rabbit tumbling across the snow, leaving behind splotches of red. She found him kneeling by the dead animal, whispering a soft prayer before proceeding to put it into a hemp sack. Over the next several hunts, she saw him repeat the same ritual on game big and small. One night, over a steaming bowl of meat stew, she confronted him on his habit to honor dead animals. They are sentient beings, Ling Feng said. Most don't mean us harm, but we do what we must. It is a choice, Yaoyao countered. We don't have to eat meat, but we choose to. Some don't consider it a choice, but a way of life. A way of life that imposes on others? Interesting philosophy. Ling Feng studied her. Have I caused offense? No, she said. I'm merely suggesting that your rationale is weak at best. And yet you hunt. With none of the pretense, she said, and after a pregnant pause, continued. I suppose I don't understand you. Ah, he said, my business at your manor and with your father is a complicated matter. Consider it an act of war where no quarter shall be given once the declaration has been made. I try to minimize inadvertent casualties. She laughed. Many of those present at the banquet brought family. A lesson most costly and most dear, but a lesson nonetheless. He sat upright and looked directly at Yaoyao, his expression severe. There are no innocents at your manor that day. My father had dealings with the Yang court, even though he is of the rivers and lakes. When he couldn't be controlled, they sought to destroy him. First his name, then his person. My father is not like the rest. He detests politics and was once a member of the rivers and lakes. Ouyang Shan is a coward who wears the mask of a hero. Above all else, he is also a fool. They used him because he is the only person my father would have dueled. And Ling Anluo lost. A small package wrapped in white linen clanged to the rocky floor before Yaoyao. Be careful not to cut yourself. It is poisoned, Ling Feng said, the raging fire reflecting off his eyes. Yaoyao slowly unraveled the thick layer of cloth to reveal a fragment of a broken blade. She looked at Feng with quizzical eyes. Look at the pattern on the blade. You must have realized your father has not used his famous willow sword in a very long time. My father would never, but he has. It was not a fair fight, not by far. Ling Feng's eyes stared past her into a memory he could not escape. I exhumed his body and had a local physician by the name of Wang Yi perform the examination, and I found that piece lodged in his chest after he had broken it off. No, Yaoyao said so softly that her peep was drowned out by the crackling fire. Your father cannot beat me. I tested him at the manor. Without deceit, he could not have bested my father. My father's sword is unrivaled. He punctuated the statement by drawing his blade from its sheath. The gray metal devoured the light like a ravenous beast, elongating shadows and darkening the black. Yaoyao shifted closer to the warmth of the fire. He has slain many villains with abyss. In his honor, I'll slay many more. You lie. I'll give your father a chance that mine never had, a fair duel. You'll return home if he keeps his appointment, alone. Find his willow blade then, and see if I'm speaking the truth. He gestured toward the broken sword fragment. Keep it. I have no use for it. The topic soured the mood between them. What would a vagabond know about honor? Had he orchestrated mass murder? Her life was in danger because of what this man had done, regardless of what he professed now. A reckoning was due. She kept the interactions between them brief and focused on studying the man. Knowing his strengths and weaknesses might help her father in the coming duel. Ling Feng was every bit the warrior he claimed to be, and more. He was fast, accurate, and decisive. She had witnessed his talent with the sword, but now saw how skilled he was with the bow, which required strength to draw and precision to hit its intended target. While they had only hunted small to medium game, she had never seen him need more than 2 arrows to down an animal, nor had she seen him miss. He was a capable tracker, noticing finer details of tracks left behind by various animals. At times, he would use her to flush game and ambush them. He was certainly not a simple man. Every morning, Ling Feng would wake and trudge through the snow without snowshoes to train his endurance. He practiced sword forms whenever the weather permitted, and did not seem to care whether she watches. The life he led was disciplined, and he ate and drank in measured quantities that did not speak of a man prone to excess. Every bit of the animals he hunted was used, extra meat salted, fur dressed, and stitched to make an extra blanket. Although her animosity remained, she came to respect certain qualities about him. As the days went by, Yaoyao found herself taking up archery to pass time. She borrowed Ling Feng's bow but declined his guidance. Whatever hatred he felt for her father and the Yang court did not seem to extend to her. While she remained vigilant and distant, the man was never discourteous and acted, much to her chagrin to admit, quite honorably. Ugh, she uttered as the arrow landed short of the target. It was a heavy bow to draw, but one Yaoyao was determined to master during her time on Mount Liang, especially if her target was a large tree trunk. It was no surprise Ling Feng saw no threat from her with the bow. She strung another arrow and began to pull with all her might until her fingers drew close to her ear before the release. She failed, and the arrow flew prematurely and far, wide. Fuck. She reached for another only to find her quiver spent. She stomped begrudgingly toward the tree, picking up several arrows along the way and plucking the 2 arrows that had made their way into the bark. They fell easily into her hand, a sign that she lacked the power to fully sink them into the wood. Yaoyao shook her head and began to tread toward the others off to either side. A sudden crunch of snow brought her to a crouch, fearing an encounter with a predator. They had encountered a pack of wolves once, and both parties were wise to stay clear of the other. The broad base of the tree offered her excellent concealment, and she began to pivot toward the direction of the noise. Where can the bastard hide? Laoji's cock, another man cursed. Who would have known the summit is this large and flat? Another day of this horrid cold, and I'll need a woman to warm my body. She spotted them, 3 armed men dressed in white to blend in with the surrounding. The one that complained was a big muscular brute with a full beard and an abnormally large hands, making him look more like bear than man. His other companions were smaller. One had a square face and a short but sturdy frame. From his movements and brevity of words, she judged him to be the most dangerous, as he was constantly surveying their surroundings. The last man was lanky but lacked the height of the big brute. If Rand weren't so clumsy and slipped, we would have a tracker to make the job easier. Fuck the bastard. Why can't Mao Zizhen pick someone who is a better climber? Too bad we can't have both skills in one person, eh? Brute chuckled. I'd rather not split my money, Blockface said as he knelt beside a tree to inspect its bark. I didn't know you had a liking for wolf piss, Yupeng. One look from Yupeng, and the big man stopped laughing. There is someone here on this mountaintop. The wood's been chipped by a weapon, too deep and shallow to be scratch marks from an animal, claws or antlers. The 3 glanced around, forcing Yaoyao back into cover. The men were more ruffians than soldiers, and made Yaoyao hesitate to engage them for aid. Why was it Uncle Mao and not her father who sent the men? Why didn't he send his own guards? Yaoyao waited and counted several hushed breaths before checking on the group. They were gone. She had the impulse to alert Ling Feng regarding the 3 men, but suppressed the idea when she thought of the impending duel. She grunted in frustration as she made up her mind. The 3 men's tracks weren't easy to follow as they covered signs of their presence, but knowing the party size and their movements helped. After several hours, she came to a small area where the trail died. Several boulders lay ahead that formed a natural shelter against the elements, an ideal campsite. When she neared the area, she saw the men's packs leaning against a rock. The familiar voices of the men came from the other side of the boulder, and Yaoyao snuck closer when she realized her mistake. Only 2 of the men were present. She turned to look for the third when she felt the sharp edge of a knife pressed against her neck. The man moaned as he sniffed her hair. And who might you be? Ouyang Yaoyao, she said, feeling the man stiffened at her name. Uncle Mao sent you for me? She felt the pressure ease, but the man kept a strong grip around the base of her neck and led her into the open. The other 2 rounded the corner and smiled at the sight of her. Lanky was the first to speak. Where did you find this little beauty, Yu Peng? Ouyang Yaoyao, meet Yi Fei, Peng said, pointing to Lanky. And Mo Hedong. The big brute, Mo Hedong, said nothing except leered. Yaoyao clutched tightly to her bow, wishing she had a more substantial melee weapon. We should go. Go where? Fei asked. We're here to finish what Ouyang Xiang couldn't do. I thought, Lady Ouyang, Peng said, meeting her eyes and pressing his point as sharply as he had with the knife. Our goal is to bring the killer Ling Feng to justice. We will return you to General Ouyang as soon as we've accomplished our mission. You stay with us until that happens, Hedong said as he licked his lips. The manner with which he spoke the words left no room for dissent. An expression of glee appeared on the faces of the men when she nodded her assent. She found a spot several paces from theirs and settled down, watching the snow flurries fall. The men were mostly quiet, except when questioning her regarding Ling Feng's whereabouts. She told them that she was held in some cave and kept inside all the while until a few days ago, when she found a way out of her bonds, stole his bow and quiver, and proceeded to make her escape under the cover of night during a recent snowstorm. She spent the rest of the time hunting small game and evading capture. Every part of this mountain looked like every other part to her, making it nearly impossible to find the original location of her captivity. They believed her. The men discussed their plans to scout the terrain and build a map of their surroundings, from where they would then strategize their hunt. She had feigned fatigue and, under the guise of sleep, continued to track their conversations. As the liquor flowed, the group grew less cautious, moving from hushed whispers to outbursts of loud laughter whenever a bawdy joke was told. The 3 were from the rivers and lakes, each from separate minor sects in the martial world, joined a group of sword-for-hires. They conducted their typical businesses required of mercenaries: bounty hunting, assassinations, transportation, protection, and anything needing discretion. Yaoyao understood the nature of their work, but it was the slow, deliberate retelling, like a cook marinating each parcel of meat for the diner to savor, that nearly brought bile to her lips. The men relished in the memories of their violence with a sadistic delight. Peng was the least talkative of the bunch, but Yaoyao knew him to be the worst. She recalled the look in his eyes and shuddered. A beast lurked inside, and the man who was in control for the moment kept his urges chained and shuddered. Yet they were there, waiting. Then she heard her name in a quiet whisper. Ouyang Yaoyao, Hedong said. See? She's asleep. You sure about this? Fei asked. Yes, I'm sure. You may have had the noble whore at Fuxi, but I haven't. It's about time I give this one a try. What do we say to Mao Zizhen and Ouyang Shan? Anything we want. That bastard Ling Feng is a little too much like his old man. There was a pregnant pause. Peng? You boys go first. There won't be much left once I'm done. Yaoyao's heart thumped loudly against her chest, but not so much so that she couldn't make out the sound of the soft footfalls approaching. The bow and arrows were easily within reach, but they won't do much good in a situation that called for a stealthier attack. As she regulated her breath to calm herself, Yaoyao thought of the one item that could save her. She reached into her breast pocket and slowly unwrapped the linen cloth, careful not to cut herself. When she felt the hand on her shoulder, Yaoyao spun, and her right hand with the broken blade darted out like a striking snake. Hedong screamed and drew back, giving her space to roll away. She grabbed the bow and quiver as she got up and sprinted into the darkness. Hey, you've made it to the end. If you like it so far, please subscribe and like. This lets me know I'm on the right path. And if you can't wait for the next installment of Duel on Mount Taiyuan, then head on over to Amazon and read the story in its entirety for free if you have Kindle Unlimited. Also, if you want to support me, please consider going to my Ko-fi and being a member. Have a great day!